Hey everyone, Marissa here. I just want to say that yes, I am wearing a shirt, but it looks a little sketchy with the type of shirt that I'm wearing. But hey, maybe we'll clickbait some people into tuning into this life-changing material that I have in store for you guys today. Very excited about this topic in particular. This is like, if I could sum up my life's work, my life's calling in just one title, this would be it. Because I am absolutely an advocate that no one really knows what's best for us in our life except for ourselves. And the tools that I'm guided to work with in this life are meant to empower others to rely less and less on external teachers, external forms of validation and external guidance, and to really tune into the wisdom of the higher self, the wisdom of the soul, in order to feel empowered to make those decisions for themselves. And so, like many of you guys, I have gone through many cycles of frustration in terms of trying to do my best to align with this wisdom. And it's not until recently that I realized that unless we are doing our best to really access the deeper layers of our psyche, then it doesn't matter how much we willpower ourselves into a certain direction for a certain amount of time, because it's only a matter of time before our house falls, right? A house divided against itself cannot stand. And many of us, what we think, what we say, what we want, what we feel, what our soul wants, what our heart wants, what our higher self had intended for us within this incarnation, are not always congruent, right? Can be very different and fractalized and disembodied. And so it wasn't until I really started feeling the effects of these specific tools and practices that we're going to dive in today that I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really the ultimate life hack, is right under our noses. Literally, it involves our noses. And we've been sleeping on it. And I even tell my daughter, like, if you continue practicing this at 7, like where you're at by the time you're my age is going to be above and beyond, right? And I want that for her. We want that for our kids as parents, right? So before I get too much on any tangents, I just want to introduce to you guys, if you've not heard of them already, this amazing company called Magic Mind. They're like these incredible little tiny, delicious matcha shots with so many yummy herbs in it. You know, I'm all about my herbs. Lion's mane, cordyceps mushrooms in it, matcha, ashwagandha, rhodiola, all these things that enhance concentration. And the caffeine is actually released slowly over a period of time. So it feels like a kind of like a gentle and grounded mental boost. And you know, I don't drink coffee because I truly am so sensitive to substances, and I've been working to become more grounded in my body over the years. And that's everything we're talking about today, is embodiment. And so coffee in particular seems to lead me in the direction of disembodiment, you know, and I understand there are healthy levels of stress as we grow and expand, and then there is just excessive stress that can be avoided. And so the first day that I took this, and you can take it in the morning, you can like take it in your purse or your bag, whatever, and just like take it midday too. But the first day I didn't really notice anything, and it said this on the card, like by day 2, you'll notice the effects. And I was like, okay, like, you know, I meet everything in life with a healthy amount of skepticism. I think we all should. But it wasn't until the next day I had actually planned to work on my website, to revamp my entire website. And I could not stop working on it. Like, I thought it was going to take me a series of at least 3 days to update my site. And I spent 3 hours in one location working on it while my daughter played at this like indoor jungle. And then when I got home, I was working on it until like 11 p.m. And generally, I'm not proud about this, you guys, but generally I have like a notorious like scrolling habit at the end of the night, like on TikTok. It's like dipping your toe in the whole world. You never know what you're going to come across. And it's always, whatever. It's always so synchronous, and people are funny. I love humans. But I have a notorious scrolling habit, and I had no desire. There was no desire. Like, even thinking about it, like, gave me this icky feeling. And I actually read up on it the next day. There's actually a nootropic in this, which I'd never heard of before, that actually helps with impulsivity control and procrastination. And both of those things are linked to scrolling, right? To being on social media, just mindlessly scrolling. So it was so cool that I noticed that. And then the next day, read up on it. And so, yeah, I finished my whole website in one day. And so it really put me ahead in terms of like projects that week. So I really recommend this, especially if you have something similar to me where caffeine just leaves you like, and there's so much science that it's just like, in terms of meditation and embodiment work, it's not always the best. So if you are looking for something that and you need a little boost now and then, I do recommend checking out this company. And I actually have links and codes that you can use that will get you 20% off your purchase. So let me know if you guys do try it. I'm really curious to see what your effects are, what you notice as well. So to get into this video, I'm going to head over to my notes because there's a lot that I want to touch on in a concise amount of time. So, this has been a topic that's been bubbling beneath the surface for some time. And my entry point today, I want to talk about a message I received from someone that was like, what's going on this year? I don't always understand what you teach on, Marissa, but my dad's losing his memory. Both of my parents are losing their memory. My daughter's sick, just was, underwent surgery to get cancer removed from the colon. And she was like, can you just tell me what's going on? And I was like, well, there's so many layers to these things. I obviously don't know everything, but I feel like I'm on to something, especially because over the years myself, I'm a walking testimony of healing things like seizures, epilepsy, fainting spells, without Western medication and Western help, because I deeply understood all of these things are spiritual. And so what I tend to notice, and what's really obvious to me at least, is that what most people are suffering is chronic disconnection from the sustenance of life. Chronic disconnection from their life force, depleted life force. And it's actually been studied. We're going to get into all of the juiciness of this as the video progresses, like the science behind this stuff, but even things like neurodegenerative diseases are linked to things like life force that is not cultivated. Cerebral spinal fluid is like what scientific people might say, but not being able to reach the pituitary gland, and activating certain regions of the brain that these tools and techniques that have been left behind by sages and yogis and mystics that they knew intuitively so many years ago, as far back as 5,000 to 3,500 BCE, we're practicing these things. And now we have science that confirms the magic behind these things and can really reveal what's happening on a physiological level, on the level of the mind. It's so incredible on the level of not just the mind, but the brain, like what's actually happening in the brain, these activating these regions, studying the regions that are associated with things like changing the way that you breathe and changing your point of concentration and deepening your muscle, strengthening the muscle of your concentration. So not saying that all of our human problems will cease to exist, but when we engage in these practices regularly, and you guys, when we engage with these practices regularly, more and more, we start to shift the place that we're identifying with. We start to shift what we're placing our identity in altogether. And even if you don't believe in spirituality, you don't have to believe in, all of these Vedic texts and, a sense of God or a sense of source. But naturally, regardless, your sense of identification doesn't just become so consumed with your own experience, because you're taking space and from the craziness and being so up close to the screen of the drama that is your life. These tools help to create space between it. And so naturally, you're identifying with something grander, even if it's not, again, God or source. It's something like the cosmos or nature. You're like, oh, I'm just a part of nature. This is just happening. There's less of an attachment and less of like a constriction in how you move in life and how you be in life. And more as we engage in these practices and we consciously, consistently cultivate space to where we're connecting with our higher mind, then over time, we will just inevitably become those freer versions of self. And if you guys have been on my channel for some time, you know that I have a deep sense of integrity. I feel a deep sense of integrity to speak about the karmic repercussions of visualization techniques and trying to control our reality from that level of still placing a sense of happiness in needing things to look a certain way, needing it to be a certain person. And the embodiment tools, the visualization tools have a time and a place. However, the path of the yogi, the path of someone that truly wants freedom, has recognized that as long as we're placing our sense of well-being, happiness, etc., and needing anything outside to look a certain way, then we're automatically creating more bondages for ourselves, more things that are binding us to suffering. Through these practices, we naturally begin to develop a sense of not being alone, right? And being a fleeting and changing part of nature like anything else. And so these methods that have been left behind for us, that we have available to us, it's interesting when you really start to dive into the why behind these things. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's bad to want certain things or to have goals or anything, because this is the human play, this is the human experience, but it is in recognizing the mechanism of nature and understanding too that the mind is nature, part of nature. So even when we get what we think that we want, so many times we hear people are unfulfilled. Well, that's because your mind is part of nature. And so that's always changing too. Everything is always changing externally, and even our internal sense of self and what we want, our desires are always changing. And so these tools help to give us a break from that incessant needing, that incessant running after pleasure, running after what we want, running after desire, and avoidance of pain, avoidance of suffering, avoidance of shame, embarrassment, etc. And so nature is not inherently bad. She is seeking to liberate us. She is working together. And so it's only until we have enough kicks and burns along the way that we have the maturity to not cling to her so much. She doesn't want us to cling to her, right? She wants an empowered co-creator. And so eventually we get to a point to where we're like, I think I've been going about this the wrong way. I think there must be a different way to live life and to enjoy life. And so we begin the journey, the pull to God. And just because someone has lived hundreds of thousands of lives does not necessarily mean that they are a wise entity. Because unless you're consciously and consistently cultivating your life force, your consciousness, your awareness, then it's really safe to say that you're just playing out the same karmic cycles again and again and again, right? We're just going through the same trips over and over again. And this all sounds very spiritual, and it is. But understand that yoga, where these traditions have generated from, yoga actually means, it's actually referring to the science of the mind. It actually means literally the science of the mind. We haven't even gotten into the scientific stuff of this yet, but understanding that spirituality is linked to how we perceive the world, which is linked to our mind. And so this is how this all ties in together, because naturally we understand this spiritual journey is one that will lead us to freedom. And a big part of feeling free actually has little to, dare I say, nothing to do with what's actually happening outside. There's a phrase, there's like a Sanskrit phrase that says, as the person, or as the mind, so the person. So if one believes that they are in bondage, that they are bound. And if one believes that they are free, then they are liberated. But how we perceive and our ability to perceive greater levels of reality is absolutely tied to our levels of consciousness. And our only inhibition to God consciousness is our mind. So we have the science of the mind to help us to understand the mechanism of nature, so we're not thrown around by her and her enticing ways. And it's not that we're running from her, because running means that we are just as bound, but it's how do we become free within it, right? It's how do we become in the world but not of it. And so when we're no longer clinging to her, not only does she leave you alone, but she works in greater harmony with you, right? So this is where we get into the scientific aspects of this work. And the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is, I highly recommend if you're on the spiritual path, it's one of those things that is a bit more for the advanced seeker and for the devout seeker. But once you really start to dive into the juiciness of these tools and what this journey is all about, and what like the hidden codology and language and all of religions talk about, this is a book that you really want to have. And I recommend the book that is translated, or the version that's translated by Swami Satchidananda. I'll leave that in the description box too. If I don't remember to do that, just shoot me a comment, okay? But the second sutra not in this whole book, the second sutra alone, and there's roughly 200 sutras that talk about the science of the mind and what you can expect along this journey and how to avoid certain pitfalls and how to really cultivate your consciousness, your life force, your pranic energy, so you become more radiant, more free. The second sutra talks about the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. The restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff, so all of the ways that the mind just like has at it with everything that happens, is yoga. So not only do we see what yoga is all about, but we're also given the method, restraining the stuff in your mind, because the only thing that inhibits us from God consciousness, so knowing that we are God, because we are, the only thing that is inhibiting that awareness and that experience of a God state of consciousness is our mind. And it's many, many, many layers. Okay, so this is where I really want to dive into the juiciness and in terms of the science around this stuff. So coming back to the fact of reading spiritual books and tuning into videos and lectures, it most certainly plays its part. And especially at the beginning of our journey, those are like anchors for us to where we need to consistently, daily, all the time be immersed in truth, be immersed in the radiance of these teachings that have so much truth infused into them, that awakens and speaks to that truth and nurtures that spark of truth within us. It is so essential. So I'm not saying it's non-essential. It's really, really essential. It just gets to a point to where embodiment needs to happen. So understanding something conceptually and then actually embodying those teachings are very, very different. Going to the lectures is equivalent to, but not like doing the work, the practices. It's very equivalent to like taking a leaf and throwing it on a body of water, the surface of the water, and expecting it to have any effect on like the depths of that body of water, right? And so it's when we're actually using these tools and these practices that we begin to experience the yoga. We begin to experience the deepening of concentration, the calming effects of the mind. And so again, we're calming nature. We're less enticed. We're less seduced by nature and her mechanisms. And so we enjoy it much more because we know how she operates and we're not clinging to her. We're not needing her to change anything about herself. And because so, our experience of everything becomes so much more magical. It's like magic. It really is. It's just a state of consciousness, right? Because those beings that have no realization of the God within, they're experiencing hell on earth. Those that have complete, absolute experience of the God within, first of all, there's no them anyways. There's the sense of I is completely dissolved. It just is. But secondly, those with complete realization are experiencing heaven on earth. And there are endless gradations of that in between. If we want to experience greater and greater levels of freedom and get closer and closer to that blissful state of heaven on earth, then we must consistently be meeting ourself, our higher self in stillness, meeting God in stillness. We have to be able to tap into the conscious mind and into the subconscious mind, where our deepest karmas and patterns and impressions are stored, if we are to actually alter them. This is what it means to become an embodied being. And again, many people are houses divided against themselves, to where what they want, what they think they want, how they be, who they are, what their soul wants, what their intention was for this life. All of these aspects are just on different playing fields. And we have tools, you guys, that have been left behind that help us to achieve greater and greater unification of these aspects within ourselves. This entire lifetime and our progression as souls over thousands, hundreds of lifetimes is a game of consciousness. It is purely a game of the mind. So to separate spirituality and the mind, to me, now seems like a really innocent and naive way to look at it, because it is completely of the mind, okay? Just like we can slip back in one life, like how we can slip back into old patterns and behaviors over the course of many lifetimes, we can also do that. Especially if we're not cultivating this energy, especially if we're not cultivating this life force and expanding our field of awareness. And so I just want to emphasize, if you've made it this far into the video, it's really unlikely that you yourself will slip so far back, because souls that are at a certain level of advancement are not interested in this type of shit anyways. They're not interested in these types of matters. Younger souls are still very much seduced and under the siren's spell, the spell of nature, so to speak. They haven't had enough kicks and burns yet to begin this journey, this pull back to God. And I highly recommend checking out that video, The Pull to God. It's called The Journey of the Soul and the Pull to God, because I go through soul ages and soul advancement, that type of thing. Okay, so that will make much more sense if you haven't seen that video already. Highly recommend it. So it's been known for hundreds of thousands of years and somehow lost along the way. These tools that actually help to expand our consciousness, that actually have shown not just on a visceral, tangible, experiential level, but on a scientific level. It is so cool to see that the spiritual terminology, to see that translated in scientific terms, okay? So by controlling our breath, we control certain physiological changes. And it is absolutely true that we cannot tap into certain expanded states of consciousness if there is a certain degree of fear and stress that is existing within our organism. It will always feel like we are swimming upstream and that we are climbing up a mountain. It will continue to feel that way until we are allowing ourselves to go beneath the surface of the subconscious. And this is like really what started my journey, you guys, because there was so much frustration of feeling so much greatness within me, and then like at the same time having a fear to like even speak my truth around my family, to even tell them about myself. You know, so you can understand the frustration, and maybe some of you guys can relate, of feeling like you have so much to give in this lifetime, but feeling so like helpless sometimes about how to muster up the courage and the confidence to actually do that, right? And it's important to understand too that we're not just working with our own karma, that it's actually been studied that up to 14 generations affects who we are. And even the vagal tone, the vagal tone of your mother, we don't come in with a fresh slate in terms of our vagal tone. And what is that? It's a bundle of nerves. The vagus nerve is like a bundle of nerves that sit at the base of our brainstem, and it connects to all of our organs and functions. It connects to our gut brain. And the higher our vagal tone is, the more bounce back we have, the more resilient we become, and the more we feel like able to just go out in life and have new experiences. So actually, like, we don't come in with a fresh slate of this stuff. So generational karma is a thing, right? Collective karma is a thing. This all is affecting us. And so we actually have tools to help reverse that and to really become more and more autonomous and sovereign beings. It's actually true, and it's been studied on through like brain scans, that we cannot tap into certain expanded states of consciousness like gamma state, alpha state, theta state, if there is a certain degree of fear and stress within our organism. And that's when it feels like we're always swimming uphill. That's when we're going to continue to meet things like self-sabotage and to like seem like we're taking 5 steps forward and then 18 steps back. I get it. It's so frustrating. And this is why I'm so passionate about sharing this stuff with you guys. And I was telling my daughter this the other day, because she breathes with me sometimes. I don't force it on her. She meditates with me sometimes. I don't force it on her, but I do encourage her, because I'm like, if you're practicing this at 7 years old, you're going to be so far ahead of where I am now at this age. By the time you get there, you're going to be so much further along. And so traditionally, breath and meditation have been paired together. And this is something that I didn't know until I recently went through my trainings and my learnings, my studies, because I have been meditating on and off, consistently and inconsistently for 7 years, breath work for 5 years now, but I've been like doing them separately. But I would always know, like, I would notice after like Kundalini, that a Kundalini yoga class, that, wow, it's a lot easier to drop in, but they're meant to be paired together, because it becomes so much easier to drop in once we start to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, once we start to activate our rest and digest, our stay and play. We cannot achieve higher states of consciousness when we're in a consistent state of fear and when we're in a consistent state of stress. What that does literally is our amygdala, it's the part of our brain that signals to our hypothalamus to release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It communicate that becomes the only part of our brain over time when we're consistently in a state of stress that is operating. So those other parts of our brains that are linked to creativity, intuition, higher ways of thinking, being able to like create anything in this world and to feel a sense of gratitude, a sense of connection to other things, other people, that those parts start to shut down. And so this is what's happening all around us. We see this all the time. People are in a chronic state of stress and they want a different life for themselves. They want so deeply to change and to answer the call of their soul, but they don't know how to, and I get it. And this is why we're talking about this today, because this is how we are going to begin to nurture that connection, to develop greater neuroplasticity. What does that even mean? If you follow like Joe Dispenza, you know, he talks about this. He's an epigeneticist, neuroscientist. People call him the modern day mystic, where he talks about all this stuff, bridging the gap between science and spirituality. And essentially, it's like when we have thought that we are who we are for so long, it creates certain neural pathways to where even if we start to get into new environments around new people, that's the self-sabotage, because it's like that version of ourself is so ingrained that we will, it's almost like a no-brainer that we will go back to that old version of self. It's like that old ex that we know it's not good for us, but something, we would like keep going back to them. There's like some tether, like neurologically, that's what's happening. And so when we breathe, when we meditate, when we pair these things together, it doesn't even have to be a long time, you guys. I'm going to get into it. It does not have to be a long time, okay? You do not have to like give your whole life away to this stuff. You can, but it's not needed. We create greater neuroplasticity to where we are able to then develop new identities, new versions of self, new habits, etc. We're increasing our vagal tone. We're increasing our gut brain, our instincts, and our bounce back and our emotional resiliency. When we allow the breath to guide us into a deep state of relaxation through various techniques that I use and that I guide others into, and then we enter meditation, it's much more likely that with the breath paired with meditation that we're going to enter those states like alpha and theta states where reprogramming actually becomes possible, right? And, you know, coming back to the breath, most people tend to be in a state, like a subtle state of hyperventilation with the breath, and maybe not so subtle states of stress, fight or flight all the time. If we really want to answer the call of our soul and we're along this path, like for me, it started off as a journey of like, oh, this is what spiritual people do, like they meditate. Like why? I never asked why. Really, I was like, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But the deeper I have gone down this rabbit hole of exploring and learning from ancients, from modern, you know, everything in between, I'm like, oh my goodness, we are sleeping. So many people are sleeping on this gold mine, and you don't even have to spend a bunch of money. Like if you breathe with me once, you have 3 tools at least usually to take away, where if you practice just 1 or 2 every day for a sustained amount of time, you don't need all the tools. You don't need all the tricks. You don't need all like the different techniques. You don't. You just need a few that you can rely on, that you know are your go-to. So you're consistently chipping away layers of falsity, layers of pretense, layers of just illusion, and meeting yourself more and more. And you become much more confident. You become much more convicted. You really do start to tap into these states, these magical states where you know anything is possible. And it's never a matter of if things are going to happen. It's always when, especially when it's coming from, you're getting visions of your future self and what this life is supposed to be, what it was intended for. And you know you're in those timelines. You know you're attached to those timelines. It's only a matter of when. The higher ways of thinking, these more expanded states of consciousness, when we pair breath and meditation together, we're actually rapidly accelerating the pace of our transformation. When you are intuitive and you're actually acting on your intuition, like that in and of itself is an accelerated state of living. That's called like super accelerated living, okay? So imagine that you're at an airport and there's like that moving sidewalk. That's like the help of your intuition, okay? But you're also moving in the direction of your intuition, and so you're moving so much faster. And so when you're not on the moving sidewalk, think of that as not being in tune with your intuition. You're kind of moving slow, and maybe sometimes you're getting off track. Maybe you're going this way, that way, you know, all ways. And while I won't say intuition is linear because it's linked with a part of our brain that is very nonlinear, it's very like mysterious. It doesn't work in a rational linear way. It's like, I like to say it too, it's like we're down here in this maze and we can choose to go through all those detours by like trying to figure out ourselves and trying to rationalize and doing things from a state of should and what society says is possible, etc. But it's like our higher mind and our intuition is like the being that is sitting above the maze and being like, hey, psst, go this way. Don't go that way. Don't turn this way. Go this way. And it's like, okay, like we just got to trust it. We just got to take their word for it, or the word of our higher mind. And so we have such a greater advantage in terms of really like not only actualizing what our soul intended for this lifetime, but to go above and beyond what our soul had intended for this lifetime. And it is possible. It is truly possible to do that. You know, these are things where I don't want to say, I never want to give a false belief that this is something that you practice once and your whole life has changed. Okay, because the consistency, the daily consistency is where we build. There's a phrase of like, we don't meditate for the eyes closed experience. So we don't meditate to always have those blast off moments, although those things are very gratifying. Those are great meditations that like keep me coming back for more. Once I taste those deeper samadhi states more and more, or deeper states of concentration is another way of saying that. Because the more we concentrate, the less our mind is fleeting around, the more we tap it more and more into the state of isness, the state of beingness, the state of bliss, ecstasy, etc. And so we're like, ooh, I want more of this, okay? But consistency is important, okay? And it becomes less about how long we meditate, the quantity of minutes in a session or a day, and it becomes much more about the quality of our meditation, right? So these are things that we must be practiced with consistency, not just within one life, but in many hundreds of lifetimes, right? Is what, for a being to come in and to be able to achieve samadhi in this lifetime, so achieve the undiluted state of God consciousness, suggests that they have been doing this for many thousands of lifetimes. And we, you know, who's to really say? Maybe sometimes we drop in and we're like, okay, I'm going to have an experience of samadhi, and that's going to set the tone for the rest of my lifetimes. Who knows how it really goes? I will say though, consistency is needed, right? There's so many different religious texts and spiritual texts, not necessarily the religion, but the truth within it, that says the necessity of consistently meeting God, consistently doing the best to calm the insane mechanism of the mind in order to hear the voice of God. We meditate for the eyes open experiences. So we're more free to move in our day-to-day activities, right? We're cultivating greater radiance. We welcome in more life force with our breath. The breath is the chariot of the soul. That is our direct conduit to our higher self. And we are embodying that light that we welcome in through the breath within our meditations. Okay, so these practices have been studied to actually increase our neuroplasticity, which we've talked about. So our ability to break identification with those non-serving habits, with those old versions of ourselves that are so icky, and then to actually embody, I don't want to say icky like we were icky, but they just feel like at a time and a place, maybe it was expanded, but it feels like we're ready to grow. Our soul is always expanding. Our soul is always calling us to embody greater versions of ourselves. And there's actually a saying that, you know, the gap that lies between what our soul wants for us and then how much of that we're actually doing, the space in between reveals our levels of unhappiness, okay? And so this is what helps to bridge the gap between those things and to make that gap smaller and smaller. It's crazy because there's so much that happens in one breath session, right? And I just really want to include this really cool thing. I just wanted to talk about scientifically and spiritually one aspect of a breath session with me and what that would look like, and just a breath session in general. So there's things that are called retentions, breath retention. So we have Vakya Kumbhaka is the inhale retention, Antar Kumbhaka is the exhale retention. And scientifically, it's super cool to see what's happening. So we're doing a breathing technique, right? And then we are doing a breath retention at the end, coupled with what's known as bandhas. This is when we're squeezing like the pelvic floor muscles. If you've taken a Kundalini yoga class, you've done this probably, where they're telling you to tighten your root lock, to engage your root lock, right? While suspending your breath at the same time. So quantum physicists have actually studied these breath retentions coupled with the bandhas, the locks, these energetic seals is another way of saying that, as tools to activate gamma brain waves and our pineal gland. Okay, so this is cool. So what's happening during our exhale retention, and when we're activating the Mula Bandha, our root lock, along with a Jalandhara Bandha, which is a tucking of chin, which creates like a Jala means dam or seal, right? We're creating a dam. And our Uddiyana Bandha, which is when the navel pulls back towards the spine, we're squeezing it. So we're actually we're generating cerebral spinal fluid, and we're circulating it up the spine, that when we release that retention and our bandhas, not only does it increase our vagal tone because CO2 has built up in our system, and by letting it build up, then releasing it, that's increasing our vagal tone. Again, a stronger vagal tone, more emotional resiliency, more bounce back, less likely to be triggered, or if you're triggered, you let it go a lot easier, okay? But the cerebral spinal fluid then enters our brain, breaking down proteins and salts, which create electrical synapses in our brain that activates our pineal gland. Okay, so that's a scientific breakdown. Okay, so we're squeezing these bandhas, we're pressurizing the cerebral spinal fluid. It's being sent up our spine to the pineal gland. What is the whole spiritual journey about? What is the whole Kundalini yoga experience about? It's about taking the Kundalini energy at the base of the spine, sending it up the spine, and where does it stop? Where do they say enlightenment happens? It's when it enters the third eye, the pineal gland. Okay, and so this is essential for our spiritual development. This is a science of the mind. This is a science of spirituality and expanding our consciousness. Okay, so going back to the beginning of this video about brain degeneration in general, what's so interesting is that when I get excited, I can't talk, okay? So brain degeneration comes from a depletion of the cerebral spinal fluid. And so when we're increasing this fluid throughout these practices, and this is just, again, one aspect of, just even a 30-minute breathing container with me, one aspect, all of these like juicy brain things are happening, brain functions, brain activations, all of this juiciness is happening. And it's a very meticulous, and everything plays at certain parts. Sometimes it's like, okay, what's the purpose of this? Or for me, I didn't really question it too much because I just trust the teachers I've been guided to work with. And I know how I feel after certain parts of each, part of a breath session or a Kundalini yoga class or whatever. But it's really cool to start to see the science behind it and to see where these intersect, where these overlay, right? And like, wow, yeah, this is literally like pumping it up, right? Because gravity pulls our energy down. Gravity will naturally pull things to the lower chakras, which a lot of people are consumed in the lower chakras, right? And so by creating the bandhas, the locks, we're actually encouraging the energy to go up. We're gazing to the third eye. Where we focus, where our focus goes, energy goes, right? Energy flows. And so it's all so cool to see just what's happening on a scientific level, to see all of its crossovers, right? And so, yeah, when we're increasing its circulation, we're increasing the cerebral spinal fluid, we are entering deeper states of relaxation where reprogramming becomes possible. We're embodying new, greater versions of ourselves. Not only becomes possible, but it happens, dare I say, effortlessly, because you're chipping away the levels of false pretense and illusion and false identities. They're falling away naturally. Okay, and again, it's not something that happens overnight. I just want to continue to re-emphasize this. It's not something that happens overnight, but it can in a short amount of time, especially if you guys have been practicing for some time, like me, practicing both of them separately. And then in this 3-month container that I've been doing it daily, breathing and meditating, and oftentimes multiple times a day, like the rate of acceleration is insane. It's insane. Okay. And our radiance has to do with our magnetism. So the more radiant we become, the more we're creating and sustaining these higher electromagnetic frequencies within our heart space, within our mind space, the more opportunities just come to us. I cannot reiterate this enough. Like within this 3-month period, like last month alone, I got my first I don't know. I feel like they'll be fine if I say this because I didn't say it in the intro, but I had my first 2 companies reach out to me that I was actually so excited to work with and like partner with, like on a brand level. I had my first 2 reach out, and it's like I wasn't really doing anything different, but my state of radiance and magnetism is what is changing. Okay, so these practices aren't so we can become yogis meditating in a cave. That's beside the point. If that might be relevant for one lifetime or a certain lifetime or someone else's lifetime, but a lot of the times that's not what's relevant for us. And so this actually helps us to come more in tune with our unique expression within this life. This helps us to embody the unique codes we came to embody, our soul's blueprint, to actualize on it, to be the best, most unique, most quirky, whatever version of self. And the more that we do that, the more free we become. So this is not tools to become like spiritually materialized, right? We're like carrying ourselves in a certain way. Like I still, I posted this on my Instagram and TikTok the other day, like I meditated for 6 hours with a friend. This was our first time hanging out one-on-one. I've known him for like over a year, and we just would see each other at like casually, like working. We help our same buddy. They like run a business together. Okay, I don't need to get into all of this, but so I would see him casually, all the time and at parties and stuff. And we meditated for 6 hours one day, and it was freaking amazing. We did this like in-app retreat, and then it was like 5.5, 6 hours. And then the week before, though, we were taking back tequila shots together. Okay, so this is not me. Like, I am not saying that these tools are going to turn us into this pure being overnight, but that more and more we are creating containers and spaces to where when those things are ready to be released, they will naturally be released. But it doesn't happen through force. It happens through this coercion, through courting this life force to come up. And who's to say? Like, I've heard of beings that are very wise, very, in tune with nature, and like, Ayurveda, and very much in these realms that like drink all the time, and they know how, that's just their natural thing in this life, I guess. And who's to say that that's like wrong, good, or bad, And I just use that as one tiny example because I do know one of the pitfalls on this path, nature in her enticing ways, is to think that something needs to change. To think anything as it is imperfect. But when we're consistently meeting our higher self in these states, we develop this sense of, we release the shame, and it's the shame that keeps us in these spirals longer. And when and if they're ready to be relinquished, they will be. And I can attest to this as well. A lot of people don't know this. Maybe, I don't know, I can't remember what my content is because I've had this channel for a few years now, but I even used to struggle with eating disorders for as long as I could remember, like binging, purging, and just like starvation. Okay. So, I don't mean to laugh if people go through that, but that's something that sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't believe like that just fell away. And I would try so hard. I just would try so hard, but there was that shame cycle. There was an over-identification with the body. Again, being so consumed in this world of form, we're just going to continue to perpetuate these things. And it's not until we get to the root of these things through meditation, breath work, the deep embodiment practices, that they will fall away on their own accord, but not until they're actually ready to do so. Okay, so just to wrap this video up, this is not airy-fairy spiritual things that we're doing here. And the only reason I'm speaking about it from the level of spirituality is because that's just me. That's like how I see life, is through that lens of spirituality. But emotionally and spiritually, I started to notice the effects of these things, and I started to see my life change rapidly before my eyes because of these things. And I wanted to know the science of it as well because I want to be a facilitator. I am a facilitator of these things. This is part of my soul's work, my calling in this life. Okay, and so just to wrap up like the different containers that I'm now currently offering, I did a 2-week like donation-based class before I had done my certification call with my trainers and with other students in my small group. But we had already gone through all the science, all of the ways to sequence, all of the different techniques. And I was creating personally curated containers, 20-minute containers, and which booked out within the first 12 hours of me announcing across my platforms that I was opening this, because we all deeply know, intuitively, we all know out of all the things I've launched, this was the quickest thing to ever like sell out or to book up, because intuitively we know that we have all the answers inside. And it's only about consistently creating the conditions to let the inner genius, the inner guide within, just take the reins, right? The chariot of our soul, to welcome in more and more our higher self to come in. So we're just part of the show. We're just watching the unfolding. Okay. And so different techniques depending on what people are working with. So some people wanted more confidence, so I have masculine techniques. Some people wanted more connection to their intuition or to just feel calm. Okay, so I'm going to use more feminine techniques. We're going to recognize the state of polarity within the student, and then we're going to utilize certain techniques that have been scientifically shown and emotionally and spiritually shown, proven through experience, to activate certain parts of the brain, right? Certain parts of our parasympathetic nervous system. Or sometimes we're activating a little bit of the sympathetic response, but in a controlled and safe container. and then entering meditation to help solidify these states, to help ingrain these states, right? And that's kind of within itself, its own embodiment, its own visualization practice, because it's what we feel, it's what we be that creates our reality. It's not what we think. Again, it's the embodiment. See, feel, be. You have to become it. And so we're solidifying that. So even in a short amount of time, I had someone just leave a testimony on my email to post on my website, to where she said she was so shocked at how 20 minutes she felt so safe. She felt so connected, and I get it. This is why I'm like, there's something to this, because the more that I would enter containers like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's not about the quantity. Although if you want to, have longer meditations, I definitely feel it serves its purpose, but it's the quality. And we're not always going to have a certain depth, because the way that trauma and the emotional releases work, we don't always know why we have superficial meditations where we don't go really deep, but they are just as essential as the deeper meditations that we will meet, especially if we're consistently courting alpha, theta, and the, occasional gamma states within these practices. Okay. So think of those smaller containers with me as like you're getting tools that you can use on a day-to-day basis. You can use every day. All right. And this is like our weekly, daily hygiene practices, right? Where this just helps our organism function at its very best. And then we have like the cleanses. Now I'm offering breathwork journeys, which is why I started even exploring these things, because I have had so many insane realizations, transformations through the power of these longer journeys, these longer breathwork sessions. I'm going to pull up, let's see, some of my notes here as I'm wrapping up. Think of these longer journeys as like our once, twice, thrice yearly cleanses. These are like our shamanic plant medicine journeys, right? To where it's necessary. I feel once in a while, it's very beneficial, useful, eye-opening once in a while, but to do it every day is like, it can be harmful and it's not necessary. It's not even beneficial, so to speak. Okay, so these longer journeys are between 60 to 80 minutes that I'm offering, and we go deep, right? These are when where I have been able to pinpoint the deepest karmic patterns within myself, because what's happening with the techniques that I'm using in these longer journeys, we're removing the veil between the subconscious and the conscious mind. We're awakening the inner guide by breathing more, by hyperoxygenating our system, which leads us into an altered state of consciousness, and a safe, altered state of consciousness, more safe, dare I say, than plant medicine. And again, someone who's very sensitive to substances, I've needed to find alternative methods to reach these peak states where I'm deep diving into the subconscious and able to reprogram it. And the types of releases that can happen in these longer journeys are insane. Like sometimes you're laughing, uncontrollable laughter. Sometimes there's tears of joy, of sorrow. You're being able to pinpoint where certain karmic behavior started, where you developed, a certain unworthiness relationship to yourself. And a lot of the times just having an awareness of where something came from, you're shining the light of your awareness on these things, is truly the first step in transformation. And then you can release, you like see where some of your protection mechanisms have been born from, and where, protection mechanisms means we're not free, right? And you can just seeing where they're born from transforms it. And you're like, oh, I don't have to operate like this. And again, that's greater autonomy, greater sovereignty, right? And so I'm offering a few different types of containers right now. And if you're not guided to work with me one-on-one, that's totally fine. I'm going to be offering free like group containers and donation-based containers for group settings. But I really love the personal containers, because this is where I'm really going to curate it specifically towards your needs, So I'm just so excited about all of this, everything that I've learned and everything that I'm going to continue to learn, and just how, naturally they say, and I've known, because I have a deep understanding of the soul's blueprint, how it works, and how our lifetimes are created, and why certain things lead to certain, catalyze us in a certain direction. And so my big thing is like working with powerful beings that have some trauma, that have, very deregulated nervous systems, and understanding that just regulating that nervous system through consistency and the proper tools, you are going to skyrocket, right? And not only that, I used to think it was like an inhibitor, but the more darkness one has experienced in a lifetime, it's safe to say, the more light you came to experience as well. Again, but once those scales have tipped and we're working with our soul's blueprint. We're working in alignment with the soul's plan and not trying to resist anything, not trying to throw any part of it away. All right. So this feels like a good point to leave off. If you want to learn more, or if you just want to reach out to me or see the plans I offer, check out my website. Everything's in the description box. Make sure to sign up to my newsletter if you do want to stay in tune for group journeys. There's like so many different things that we're going to do, and I'm so excited for them. And yeah, thanks for joining me here. And I hope I do get the opportunity to breathe and meditate with you soon. And I do want to say a quick reminder that if you're looking for a change in your morning routine and looking for a more sustained and less disembodied caffeine boost, or just like energy boost, mental clarity boost, I really recommend checking out Magic Mind. Again, everything that you need to know, the 20% off code is in my description box as well. And I do hope to see you guys again on my channel soon. Much love.